Hey all, thought I'd do a video on birth year watches and just using my birth year, which was 1963. What I did was I went out and Googled iconic watches of 1963 and then just selected the brands. Like, if you're rich, you probably could have bought a Rolex Submariner or something, or a Daytona, I think was good watch in 1963, but maybe you need 120, $160,000. I don't know how much they are these days, but I don't own any Rolexes and I doubt I ever will. But moving on, I chose three or four. I've got three at the moment. I've got another one coming, but this is only three watches I'm going to do today. Three watches that I thought were, they spoke to me and they were also iconic for the year 1963. So the first up is this um, beautiful Seiko. It's called a Skyliner, if you can see it, and it's very sparse in the dial. This was the jet age, in the 1960s, and everything had to be thin and stylish and, not cluttered. So there's a movement in Germany called the Bauhaus style, and this is what would probably come in there. And the watch is just so beautiful. There's no numerals on it. That's also another feature of Bauhaus style. So as minimalist as possible. Um, so it's got this thing they call the swirly font, and it's quite a famous thing as far as fonts go. And it's a manual wind watch, and it's so thin. I could get the calipers out, but I doubt if it will be more than about 12 millimeters. I don't seem to have them close by, so I won't bother. Just a simple gold case back, and this came from Japan with the leather strap on. Normally I change watches out, but I just think that this strap sort of suits it with the colour, and I don't think I'm going to change it at this stage. So I've just left that as is. So yeah, it's just a very minimalist, and it offered budget or relative budget style features that the King Seiko had at a fraction of the cost. So there's some um, overlay between the Seiko brand and the King Seiko brand with this type of watch from 1963. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful watch. I'd call it an 8 out of 10 or so with um, as far as quality and condition goes. Is beautiful. I don't know. Oh, there's a tiny little crack at the bottom there, and I do believe I have a spare glass with this one. It's either this one or the other model, but that doesn't really worry me. I've had this watch wound for 3 days straight with a whole lot of other ones, and I'm not a time Nazi or whatever you like to call it, but it kept relative time with the other half a dozen watches that were going for 3 days straight, so it wasn't losing. Within a minute, I'd call that okay. And I'd say for a 1963 watch, good thing with the Japanese is they generally do a good service before they send something out, and you're less likely to get a Franken watch if you buy something from the Japanese market. I'm not saying you won't get one, but yeah, it's just a beautiful little simple dial for dress wear. And that's the first watch. Moving on to the second one. I've chosen to stay within the Seiko range, and I actually discovered this next watch after I discovered that one. And that's what watch collecting is. It's just digging into history. And I think that everyone will agree that we've all either looked at or collected a few of the Seiko 5 range. And this was the genesis of the Seiko 5. So the Sportsmatic 5 in 1963, and that's another great example. Again, a fairly simple minimalist movement, but it's got the day date feature, which was introduced in this model, which would probably exclude it from what you call the Bauhaus style, because that would clutter the dial a little bit. So it's quite an iconic watch, because the Seiko Sports 5 or Seiko 5 range, I think it's just been decommissioned. So it's been going since 1963, basically. And you can see the little 5 underneath the 5, the Sportsmatic, at the top there. And so, as I said, it was the genesis of the Seiko 5 lineup, launched in 1963. And The 5 components remain the same to this day. It had to be automatic, and with this model they introduced a magic lever where the rotor wound the mainspring in both directions. Also, it's similar to all Seiko 5s, it had to have the day and date function. So this was a groundbreaking thing at 3 o'clock there, you can see. Had to have water resistance. So back in 63, most of the watches you wore would fog up even in, if you're walking in the rain, even under your suit jacket, because it'd get humid. So dress watches have a problem like that back in the day. And so water resistance, they said swimming or light rain. Now, I wouldn't even take this washing up dishes these days because I don't know how it's been treated. Again, with this watch, I had it going for 3 days and it didn't lose any time. So I'd say it's been well serviced by the Japanese market. The fourth thing was the recessed crown at the 4 o'clock position. Now, this is a really good feature because I ride mountain bikes and motorbikes in the bush and it's very extreme. There's a lot of rocky things. And when you've got a 3 o'clock crown, you can feel it bashing against your wrist. In all reality, you probably should not ride an automatic in those extreme conditions, but even a manual quartz watch, it's normally got the crown at the 3 o'clock. So the 4 o'clock position is a great thing, or 2 o'clock would be just as good. So that was a new improvement in the Seiko range there for the Seiko 5. So the recessed crown at 4 o'clock. It gives you much better wrist comfort. Number 5 was the durability. And that's really spoken with these watches. Like the Seiko 5 range, you can basically wear them anywhere. You can go surfing with them. They've got 200 meters water resistance, and you probably, no one's going to dive to 200 meters, but if the more water resistance you've got, I think in my book equates to more shock resistance as well. So if you're surfing on a wave and it could be 8 foot, 10 foot, and you come off at the top of that wave and you free fall down the bottom, you're going to be falling at about 30 kilometers an hour when you hit that water. And the first thing you do is put your arm out. And, I've never owned a Seiko back in the day. I always had the Citizen version from 1978, and I've still got that. I'll just show you it quickly. Has nothing to do with this, but that's it from 78. They're worth about $1,500 now. And that's still, it's a little bit out as far as time goes, but I wore that every day for 15 years or so, and it's hasn't been worn regularly for probably 20 odd years, 30 years, but I wear it every now and then. I just had it out the other day. So that's the Citizen version of it. But that Seiko really lifted the game with durable all-round watches. So I think that's really good. In-house engineering was another thing that they went for with all their stuff. And by 1966, there were more Japanese Seiko watches being exported around the world than all the Swiss watch companies combined. So they really dominated the market, the quartz market. And the next watch I'm going to introduce is actually a victim of that because they dominated the mechanical watch movement. So in 1960, Bulova launched this range called the Accutron, and it was there's a little bit of debate. In 58, Hamilton released an electronic watch as well, or before them, 2 years or so before. But this is recognised as the leader in the electronic range. And the example I'm going to show you here is a really special one. So this is the 1963 Bulova Accutron Astronaut. And you can see, the space age dial on it just looks very UFO-ish for the time. And what is so significant about this watch is, or there's a number of things, but is really more the absence of something than the presence of something. And if you can guess it, 10 points. If you can't, have another look and a think about it. And I will show you by flipping the watch over. So the little compartment there, or the big compartment there with the recess, that's where the battery resides, and you can get it open with well, you can't really fit a coin in there, but I used a little piece of wire off something. Anyway, that's not important. The other one is the crown, and it's recessed within the back of the watch case, and you lift it up. I won't try and do it now because it's a little bit fiddly. If I try, let me see. Yeah, here we go. So you can see the crown lifted up, and then you just turn that to the time. And this model doesn't have the hacking movement because it's a 63, but later models of this do have hacking. And one thing that you'll never see on later models of any watches is waterproof, because it was made illegal to say the word waterproof with watches. So even if they're 1,000-meter tested, they have to say water resistant to 1,000 meters. So that's what made this watch quite special, is having no crown, and it gives it a real uncluttered movement. It's got a non-clicking turning bezel, and it's also got a GMT hand, which is pretty amazing, and it was used quite a lot. So it's the world's first fully electronic watch which replaced the balance wheel and the mainspring with a 360 hertz tuning fork. Now 360 hertz happens to be the vibration of the note F sharp. So I've actually put this up against a ukulele tuner that I have, and it's about halfway between F and F sharp. So it's not quite F sharp, but it'd be more F sharp than F if you had to split hairs on that one. So vibrations are just waves, and musical notes produce waves and vibrations. So the note F sharp on the current Western musical scale vibrates at 360 hertz, which is the vibration of this watch. And most mechanical watches only go up to about 280 hertz. And it was using what they call the 214. So this is referred to as the Bulova 214 Accutron Astronaut. And the 214 went from 1960 to the mid to late 70s, where it was finally made redundant basically by the quartz watch invention, I think in 1967. And they came out with a Bulova 2 movement, which uses, it still uses a tuning fork type movement, I believe, but it doesn't vibrate at F sharp, and it down to about 280 odd hertz. So they were the forerunner of, I believe, the Precisionist range, which is still in place today. But this watch came in 3 or 4 variations. There was the standard dial that everyone would wear as a dress watch, and then there was what they call the railroad watch. And if you just bear with me for a second, I forgot to add that. So there's actually 4 watches in that collection. I'll just grab that watch. Hang on a tick. So I'm in the middle of putting a band on it. I had a few problems with this is an 18mm band, and it's about a 17.3, what would you call it, 17.3 gap in the lugs. So what I want to do after I get off here is just get a tiny file and file it down a bit. So the band I'm replacing with just a Spiral that came with a leather band. So that one I kept stock, but these two I've replaced the bands because I just like my colours better. So this is a 1963 birth year watch as well. It's the Bulova Accutron Railroad. So basically these two are using exactly the same movement. If you turn them over, you can see same case back. This is what they call the 14 karat gold field. It's not expensive gold, it's just what they refer to it as. The 18 karat ones I think are the expensive ones. This is the silver model. So as I said, there were 4 basic models. I've got the 1963 other model coming. So I'll tell you about that. So the Railroad, which is this one here, is the first. I'll move everything over a little bit so you can see it. So this was the Railroad, and it's guaranteed. Well, the movements are the same, so they're all guaranteed, these two, to plus or minus 1 second a day, which was one plus or minus 1 minute a month, which was 150 times faster than mechanical watches, which made the accuracy a lot easier. So as I said, they were made from 1960 to 1977. So that's the Railroad. Then there's the Astronaut. If you bear with me, I'll just grab a space view. It's not a 63. It's actually a 73, but things didn't change much with it. So I'll show you that. As I said, I've got a 63 coming. So that's a space view. And they were very unique at the time because they were just meant to be an example for the salesman to show the jewelers, and the jewelers loved it so much when they showed their clients, the clients wanted them. So Belova actually gave the jewelers permission to rip the faces off the dials. And so a lot of people say, oh, yeah, these are Franken watches. But the definition of a Franken watch is a lot more vague with these Accutrons because the factory actually gave them permission to do it. So if you see one with a gold chapter ring on it, which is like an inner bezel that doesn't rotate, it's most likely a factory produced one, or someone has retrofitted it. They do look a lot more blingy, but expect to pay probably double or triple the price of this one. Now, it's hard getting ones that are complete, but this is still the 214 movement, as you can see. And for all intensive purposes, the 63 looks fairly similar to that. And I really like my choice of watch straps on that. It does complement. So going back to it, we've got the Railroad, which is this one, the Astronaut, and the Space View. And what I'm saying with this guy, or all these people, I'll use the Astronaut as the example, is they're famous for having no side crown. They were used as a marketing tool, and from 1960 to 1977 was their production range. The Astronaut itself had 46 space missions, which is no mean feat. It was also on the Apollo 11. The CIA used the Astronaut in their Cold War spy planes when they were, taking photographs of Cuba and Russia and all that sort of stuff. It used a 1.3 volt mercury battery, and they're now illegal. So a lot of people are putting these 1.55 batteries, and I've tried them, and they run fast. People say, oh, they don't run fast if your watch is tuned. I don't know if that's the case or not. So I've got some 1.33s coming from Canada. They don't, of course, use mercury. I forget what the compound is, but they're totally legal. It's just we don't sell them in Australia. So I've got 5 of those coming. These chew through batteries, sadly. That's the real downside to them. This is the 214, or both of these have the 214 movement. And it, as I said, it lacks the hacking that's available. And I think the hacking movement came in around 1965, but don't quote me on that. But you'll know that it's a hacking movement because it's called the 214H. So, yeah, very famous watch. And that's basically what I call a birth year watch list. Probably the most famous watch, as I possibly said, was the Paul Newton Daytona. I think that was released in 1963. But if you got 120, 160,000, I'm talking Australian dollars, it could be less or more even in America. I just did a quick Google on Daytona. I don't even know if that was a 63 because they just say 60s with a lot of them. They don't actually say the year. But that would never be in my, if I won Lotto and it was $30 million or something maybe, but I'd rather give that money to charity than buy an expensive watch. These watches are relatively cheap. I mean, I could tell you how much I paid for this. This was about 500 Australian. So you're actually paying for vintage, well-kept vintage. So the Japanese market is unique in that they tend to keep stuff very clean and tidy, but they charge a premium. I also collect ukuleles, and the same thing applies there. If you're going to buy a Martin ukulele off the Japanese market, expect to pay 20 or 30% more, but expect almost all of them to have no cracks or anything like that. So they really like their quality and they look after stuff. That's a generalization, but it's what I've come across over the last 6 months or so. So that's the first one, the Skyliner that we talked about. The Seiko Matic is the next one, the Seiko 5. And that's a beautiful watch on its own. I'm just going to leave that like that with the band. I was thinking of putting a silicon one on, but they wouldn't have had those in the day. So I'll just leave it at that. And this Astronaut's actually got one of the original period-specific bands coming, but JB Champion, I think it is. And I got it. This one is new old stock. It's coming. it's not the bullet bracelet. If you're going to buy a bullet bracelet, which is period specific, you could be paying as much as 500 Australian or 300 or 400 US. With this one, it's still a JB Champion. It's one of the expandable bracelets. I think I still paid probably 100 US or so. Of course, you've got our GST, which is 10%, and shipping is expensive both ways. So you've got to factor that in as your final price for everything. But I didn't buy these watches to make any money off. I bought these watches because they were made in the year that I was born. I have no actual affinity with them apart from that year, but it just gives me a nice feeling to think that this technology is, 63 years old. I'm 63, born in 63, so that's a little bit of a conundrum in its own way. But yeah, this gold-filled watch is beautiful. And like I could have bought a period specific case band for this and paid $200. I paid 19 or 20 Australian dollars for this Speidel new old stock band. And I think that's perfect because the railway men, you think of the railway men back in the day, like the Fat Controller, they weren't rich or anything. They were well paid compared with the average person, but they wouldn't be sporting bling and everything. This would be as blingy as they get with the gold case watch. And I think again with this one, all up probably 600 I might have paid, 500, 600, but it's a beautiful watch. It's got the 1.55 battery that I replaced in it, and it's was running too fast. It looks like it's stopped completely now. Yeah. So that only lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks. So that's not a good sign. But as I said there, it's going again. I gave it the tap. So they can actually stop. If you have a problem with them, just give them the tap at the 3. They're very unlikely to stop when they're on your wrist because the vibration will keep them going. But it's a known issue with the older ones. And I think, all these watches I probably should drop in and get serviced. I'm going to wait till I've got them all here. And there's a vintage watch repairer in Coffs Harbour, which is 100 kilometres from me. I don't know if they do Accutron. I'm going to find out. Having said that, there's also an Accutron specialist supposedly in the Gold Coast, which is about 300 kilometres away, about 3.5 hours on a motorbike. So I would ring either of them up and see if the Coffs guy, I'd just drop them off and leave them there. The Gold Coast guy, I'd like to drop them off and stay, like a car service and, stay the night or stay 2 nights up there. And so I don't want to just go up and come down in one day. It's a long trip. I've done it before many times, but I'm getting too old now. I like to just have a bit of a rest. So yeah, this Accutron Railroad 1963. The Space View, this is a 73, but same as the 63 for all intensive purposes. Intents and purposes, some people say. I think it's intensives. I don't know. Intents and purposes. Intensive. I have to look that up. This is my favourite, the Astronaut. It's just a cool watch. The space program pilots were all given one. And so they all had that as an issue. When they started doing the Apollo missions, the speed timer did replace it. But the problem, see, with mechanical watches, you get a lagging, and it slows the pressure, the high G's, the pressure, the temperature, everything will slow those watches down, whereas electronic watch is not subject to those forces. So yeah, beautiful watches. I'll just give you a look, just sitting on my wrist with each of them. I've got a 17 centimetre wrist, I believe. So I've got really big hands. Well, not big, but chunky around there. And then it goes quite thin there. So 17 is about 6 3/4 inches. So I'm not actually going to put them on. It'll just take too long. But yeah, I like that one. That looks really cool. Especially with the blue band. Like I just thought gold with the blue looks good. And it's just a band that I happen to have lying around. The Railroad one is, that would be, if I was going to work each day, that'd be a watch I'd like to wear to work because it's got the 24-hour dial. When I used to work in IT, we worked in 24-hour time all the time because if you did a change at, say, 11 o'clock, you wouldn't want to bring down the bank system at 11 o'clock in the daytime. You'd want to wait to 2300. So we talked in 24-hour time regularly. So that's a good way of knowing with the little numerals there. Same with this, it's got the 24-hour time there. And with the GMT movement, pilots always wanted to track other time zones because in the United States there'd be different bases that they'd have to be dealing with and things like that. So that's a fairly early feature for watches. I think, with most of the early features, I think your Rolex or whatever would be pioneering things like the GMT movement, but I'm not 100% sure. But I mean, this is nothing like a Rolex movement because it's electronic. So it ticks a lot of boxes for amazing accomplishments from back in the day. And just I like how all these 314s, they just sit so neatly because of this recessed crown. And I don't know why more people don't do it. It's probably because it's very hard to fit everything in there. But I think for quartz watches where you don't need a lot of movement, it'd be great because you don't really need a crown sticking out, and it just makes the dial, and the dials they're coming up with nowadays, you just don't want to take anything away from the dials. Some of those, the applied dials, the applied leaf, and all the intricate patterns is just amazing. That's where the dials are going. Just all this micro art, I call it, that people are performing on it, and some of them are hand painted and just amazing. Like I can't even paint a tin soldier, so I can't even draw a stick figure. So there's a saying, you may not know art, but I know what I like, and or I may not know art, I know what I like, and that's it. So I know this has been a long video, but I can't stop crapping on, and I'd just like to talk about the birth year watches, but you can go and apply it to any year that you are. If you were born 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there's going to be a watch that was released that's going to tick a few boxes, or a model of a previous variant, and just find something that you like, find a price that you like, hold out if you want, because it's not always going to be that price. It could go up, it could go down. As I say, I don't really buy the watches to make money on. If I had to sell my collection today, I'd probably lose 60% of the price, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, that's the Bulova Accutron 63. Beautiful watch. It's my favourite out of the lot, I think, and I'm going to start wearing that quite often. So I hope you have a nice watch collecting journey on your birth year. If you've got any really iconic birth year watches, leave me a comment with what ones that you think are okay. And if you like Rolex and Breitling and all those brands, that's good. I just can't justify buying something like that. I'd probably break it within a year or so anyway. So with these cheaper watches, even though you're paying good prices now for something like that, so vintage watches are always a good alternative. Anyway, have a good one.